All right, folks, my name is Bob Nash. I'm the Dean of Academic Affairs with the California Virtual Campus Online Education Initiative. And today we're here to talk about something very important to us and our students, how we develop and deliver online science labs fully online. Right now we have several colleges doing online science, fully online science labs in several different ways, which we'll learn about. But still there's a scarcity of this course that satisfies GE requirements for UC and CSU statewide. In fact, if you go to cvc.edu and use the Finish Faster tool, as many students do, to find the course they cannot find online at their home college, we find that there are 3 bottleneck courses that are most searched for: public speaking online, math online, and online science labs. And for students who really find it extremely difficult to come to a campus for whatever life reasons, or those who cannot leave home and want to finish their degrees in any reasonable amount of time, this is very important. So to increase the inventory of these courses, quality courses, statewide for these students will help increase completion and speed to completion. And I will just introduce them by name first, and then I'll make a few remarks, and then we'll go back and one by one they'll speak to you. But we have Crystal Jenkins from Santa Ana College, Kelly Rupert here from Coastline College, Roy Mason at the end from San Jacinto College, and Tanya Murray also from Coastline. I have been teaching online science for several years, and they have some tips and strategies they're going to share with you. But first, let me give you some background that should help you digest this conversation. First, to confirm, 2 years ago, the chancellor of the CSU system did confirm for all of us that a course, be it online science labs or others, that is fully vetted through its community college curriculum committee, is transferable. It can be on-site, hybrid, or online, but it's fully transferable. That was a question many years ago. It is no longer a question. These courses are transferable. Secondly, I'd like to remind you that there are alternative ways to account attendance and compute FTES for science labs that Title V allows us. We don't have to count butts in seats, positive attendance for these fully online distance labs. And these are links in the presentation that you can go to and get the original documents. Secondly, for our guidance in developing these courses, I recommend that you go to the CID descriptors that have been prepared for us. There are not a lot of them in the science lab area, but there are a few. For instance, geology is up there. You can see a CID descriptor for geology, and it reads a lot like a course outline, and it describes many of the things they're looking to see in a transferable geology course for GE credit. CID is part of the transfer model curriculum that produces our ADTs. And lastly, the guiding notes for general ed also offer some guidance for those developing online science labs. And if you go to that document, you'll see must be associated with a lecture component, either concurrently or separate course. Course outline must clearly distinguish the lab parts of that. Lab manuals are required, and yet there is no explicit description for or against hands-on. So that opens the door for virtual labs, which will be discussed today. I want to also send you to this resource. The Statewide Academic Senate recently surveyed a number of science instructors statewide asking this question: whether or not you teach online science labs. If you teach it, how do you do it? If you'd like to teach it, how do you think it might be done effectively? And those survey results are very informative, and I consider that this might help you as you develop courses and deliver them as well. Keep in mind these will be accepted for transfer among the UCs and CSUs, but some of the private colleges have their own articulation issues. So your counselors need to be involved in this, and they'll know where the bumps in the road are. And lastly, this is the beginning of this conversation, not the end. We're going to create an online space, a community of practice for those instructors who are either teaching online science labs now or thinking of doing that. Faculty to faculty sharing. We've created a portal, and there's a sheet going around. Kate Yordahl has a sheet going around. Give us your name and email, college email address, and we can, in a sense, enroll you in that, and you can begin sharing in discussions, sharing resources, best practices, questions, answers, and I'm going to solicit these folks to be in there too to continue the conversation. All right. Now each of our panelists will have 5 minutes to present just some summary nuggets of wisdom, tips and strategies. That's going to take about 20 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for questions and comments from you, the audience, back and forth. All right? First up, Crystal Jenkins, Santa Ana College.
Okay, so tell me if you can't hear me, and I'll try and speak a little bit louder.
Just put it close to your mouth.
Close to my mouth.
There you go.
Okay, so I teach a GE chemistry course, Chemistry in the Community at Santa Ana College, and it consists of both an online lecture and an online lab. And so what I wanted to share with you are just some bits of information that I think faculty should know before they consider teaching a chemistry course online. So my first nugget of information was that it takes time. We tell students all the time that online classes sometimes take more time than face-to-face classes. I want to let the faculty know that too, that I have found in teaching chemistry online that it requires a lot more time on my part than it does if I were to teach that same class in person. And I've kind of figured that it's possibly due to the fact that I now am interacting with students one-on-one instead of 1 to 30. So I want you to be aware that it does take a lot of time for the grading, for the online discussions, for even preparing the material that you're going to present online, and especially if the class has an online lab. Now, consider the time that you spend one-on-one with each student in completing their labs, because they have questions that have to be addressed individually also. Okay, my second nugget was discussion board topics. Students, the first time I taught the class, they're all like, well, the discussion board topics really have nothing to do with what we are learning in the class. You know, we have to have these discussion boards so that there's some interaction between you and the other students too. So make them relevant. Try and find things that you think your students are going to be interested in talking about, and it takes some time. You have to teach the class maybe several semesters before you come up with ideal discussion topics. It's a kind of like a hit and miss type of thing. After 3 or 4 years of doing this now, I think I have about 6 or 7 really good discussion topics that get the class going as they're building this online community. The third nugget is I think the online hands-on experience for the experiments is great. That's the one part of the class that the students tell me every semester they really enjoy, doing the experiments at home. That gets them even considering maybe science is something they want to get involved with as a major. And it's not only them. When they're doing these experiments in home, at least 50% of my students every semester say, oh, my daughter did it, and she loved it. Oh, my son watched me, and now they want to, I've got to go out and find more things for them to do too. Okay, so there's some other advantages, pros, that come along with being able to do it hands-on. But if that student intends to take any other chemistry courses, now they at least have some basic knowledge about glassware, making measurements, using significant figures. They had this in their hands and they felt it. So there's an advantage to having hands-on experience in the lab too. We use the eScience lab kit for our hands-on lab experience in our class. Okay, number 4, tell me if I'm running out of time. I'm trying to speak quickly. I'm good. All right, so my 4th nugget is student verification and identification. It's difficult, but it's possible. So that was one of the issues that we have with any online class, right? How do I know that it's actually my student doing the work? How do I know that it's actually my student taking the test? How do I keep my student from cheating on their exams, right? Those are always concerns. So in my class, I have designed the class knowing that my students are going to use their books and materials during their quizzes. So I don't have exams throughout the semester. I have quizzes, and they're module quizzes. The class is 8 weeks. The students take 7 quizzes. And in the instructions, I tell them, get your books, get your materials, be prepared for this quiz. You have 30 minutes to finish it, knowing that they are going to use the materials for the quiz. And so on those quizzes, I don't do verification. It can be done, but I don't because of how the quizzes are set up. And they are roughly 10% of their course grade. But my final exam is verified. And my final exam, the students have about 60 minutes for a 50-question exam, which is verified by proctorial online. Students have to show their ID, they are watched by webcam, they are listened through their microphone, and proctorial watches their eye movements and their head movements and lets me know if the student has done things that are cheating. So I can go back and look later. All right? Okay, so those are my pieces of wisdom.
What was the name of the program you said you used?
Proctorial.
Proctorial. Yes, actually, and they're among if you're a consortium college with CVC OEI, it's among our ecosystem products for consortium members, and there's a discount through the College Buys Foundation as well for any California community college to use that tool. All right, thank you. Hold your questions. We're going to get those at the end. Now, next up, Kelly Rupert from Coastline.
All
Geology, right?
Yes, yeah. Hello. I do teach a geology lab and lectures for Coastline community, and I'm going to actually piggyback off something Crystal said, which is the first one is it's very wise to plan your assignments, quizzes, exercises very carefully. So when I first started teaching the labs, I was overwhelmed by the amount of stuff to grade and monitor. So I've come up with a way to, what the students do is they'll do their lab in their lab manual. And they actually get like a rock kit and a bunch of topographic maps and all sorts of things that they're interacting with, just like they would do in a standard lab class. I think it's a little easier than maybe chemistry would have for things like that. And they do their assignment just like they would do in a normal traditional lab. And then what they're graded on is actually a quiz where I ask them questions that they can only answer if they completed that assignment correctly. And I didn't want to have to grade the answer granite, 25 times by hand. That seems silly. So what I do is I give them lots of entries, like it'll say, sample 4, this was A, and then they type it in. And so I go through and there's 10 possible answers. Granite all caps, granite's all lowercase, granite with a capital G. Any possible combination that they could have done to make that answer still correct. And so that really cuts down on my grading time. And then I always have a few questions for each lab that is just a free response. And then I hand grade those. So they're still getting some interaction and feedback from me, but I spend my time wisely on those and let the technology grade granite 14,000 times for the next 10 years. And along with that, they get initial feedback, right? So you can put things in right away where they know right away if they got that answer right or wrong, and I'll talk more about why that's important in a second. So that's my first one. I think that's what I wanted to say about that. The second one is to choose your course materials carefully. So at least for geology, I would not be able just to take a standard lab book and make that into a class that I think would be okay for my geology students. The science I teach is extremely visual, and so the lab manual that I've chosen, and I was lucky enough to actually get to work on, has a ton of supplementary materials, have a lot of videos. There are frequently asked questions where professors were interviewed with the topics that are very commonly misunderstood, and the instructors are standing up there, talking about, how, magma cooling works, or whatever the topic might be that tends to be pretty confusing. And so I have a lot of supplementary materials, so they have the presentation in the lab manual, plus a lot of visuals that go along with that. And that's only accomplished by picking something that offers that. It's just very time consuming to do that on your own, especially with having to close caption everything and to keep things compliant. And so I'm very lucky to have a manual that's very good at supporting that. The one trade-off for that is that it can be kind of expensive. The students have to pay for all of that. But there was a lot of time that went into developing that, and I think is really the only way you can do a class like that. Otherwise, they're going to have to spend the gas money to get to class, right? So they're going to be spending it in an access code instead. So that would be my second one. The third one is to plan to check your email a lot and grade submissions quickly. And so I have the added challenge of I teach this class in a regular distance learning class, but I also teach it to military students. And so they oftentimes are gone for a couple weeks at a time, and then they have to kind of do like a summer school approach where they're doing lots of lessons very quickly. So on top of the challenge of I can't always set firm dates for stuff, I have to be more flexible than I think other classes have to do. I do need to respond to them very quickly. I don't want them waiting even 12 hours for an answer back. So I check my email right before I go to bed at midnight. I check it first thing in the morning. I check it several times through the day. A lot of times I don't have to answer anything back right away, but when I get those emails coming in, I feel it's very important for me to answer it back quickly, because if you're in an actual lab, you have a 3-hour lab, they get the answers immediately. They get stuck at home, there's nothing they can do until you answer them back. And so I think the commitment to teaching an online lab is that you have to be willing to interact with your email, through discussion boards, whatever, very, very quickly, and be available for that. And I think that's what I wanted to say, at least initially.
Very good. Thank you, Tanya. Or Kelly. Tanya later. But right now, Roy Mason.
Well, thank you. Is that on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. It was about 16 plus years ago that our vice president came to the biology department and said, we have this exciting new challenge for you. Our institution, Mount San Jacinto College, wants a fully online transferable associate degree. And your non-majors biology class has been chosen as the course that we're going to offer for this laboratory science credit. And of course, being the good faculty, we all said, over our dead bodies. There's no way in H that you're going to have an online laboratory course. So after we were promised some new materials and some computers, I still have the old laptop it is still running that I got for doing this. We said, all right, we'll try it. So that was how we started this whole thing. It started as we wanted to be college transferable. And I just brought a couple of our things along here. You guys have all seen these, like GETSI requirements and the CSU transfer requirements. And every one of these requirements has that science inquiry requirement. You gotta have a lab course. And so we actually sat down and said, okay, we've had lab courses forever. We've got to put them online. So how are we going to do that? And of course, we started out with just saying, okay, we're going to take what we do on campus and we're going to put it online. And that did not work. It was just a total failure. So it was good for our faculty to sit down and say, what are our expectations of the students doing laboratories? The laboratories we have on campus for a non-major, as well as what those laboratories were going to be online. And so what we came up with that is that idea, it's scientific inquiry. You got to use the scientific method. That's what separates our classes from all the rest of the courses that you see on these transfer sheets. And so that was what we as a science faculty said. It's got to be something that gives them actual scientific inquiry, asking the questions, formulating the hypothesis, observing the interactions that are going on, getting results, and then looking at drawing conclusions about what those hypotheses were. And so that's what we started out with. We wanted to make sure it was going to be transferable, and this was long before anything was being talked about. So we went to our neighboring institutions. We went to our faculty members at UCR. We went to our faculty members at Cal State San Bernardino, at Cal State San Marcos, and said, okay, you guys, we want this to transfer to your institutions. What do you expect? And all of them, as well as all of us, said, we want authentic laboratory experiences, hands-on. We want our students to manipulate the tools of science. We want our students to have experience with the chemicals, with the actual materials that they would do there. And so, okay, we said, let's try that. At that time, there was very little in virtual. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about virtual. We have nothing against virtual. But I was thinking about this. We're at Disneyland. And I remember when our children, and they're long grown adults now, but our children wanted to go to Disneyland the first time. And they saw Disneyland on TV, and they wanted to go, and they wanted all those things. It's a very different experience of seeing it on TV and going to Disneyland. And it's exciting, but our kids weren't ready to stand an hour in line to go on their things. They weren't ready to have the actual Disneyland experience. It is the fun, it's the excitement, but there's also a lot of other things there. It's like the cooking shows. In the cooking shows, oh, they just do this and they just do this, and in 5 minutes, oh, you've got this great thing. And my wife says, well, why don't you make that? You know, all right. It's a very different experience when you have the hands-on to do it. The experience has to be real. So that's what we said. Our labs have got to be real. So we decided that we are going to do our lab kits. And I had my instructional aides, and we sat down and we put together those kits all in our labs, and we sent them out, and we did that first class, 30 students, and that was done in 2004. After 2 semesters of that, my IA said, no more, we're not doing this. And I said, thank you, we got to do something else. So we contracted with another group to do it, and that happened to be Ward's. We did that, but there was a problem. We still had that problem with the lab manual and what was going on. And so that comes to the idea of how do we engage all learners? And what we came up with 3 years ago is I went and I explored many of the products, and we came up with the eScience lab kits. And I brought some of those materials here today, you guys, just to show them to you. But I also brought my onions, okay? And
Yeah, we can smell them, Roy.
and it's one thing for a student to look at a picture of a single cell. It's another thing for them to pull an onion apart and see a 1 cell thick thing. They can't get this experience virtually. It's one thing for them to talk about photosynthesis and how photosynthesis relates to the living systems that this thing has to do. What compares this thing to this thing? What is real? It's one thing for you to talk about mitosis in onion root tips. It's a whole nother thing for a student to see the onion root tip and see how that onion root tip connects to the onion itself and connects to the part of the plant that's actually doing the photosynthesis, and how that energy is transferred from the sun to this plant to us. And so that's the experiences that we wanted to have for all students. And the one thing that we really liked about the laboratory, the eScience kits, was they not only produced the materials that come with it so that you can see the difference between 100 milliliters and 10 milliliters, but they also produced the lab kit, the laboratory manual that goes with it. And that manual is 100% ADA 2 required. It takes all of that out of our hands. It takes all of that out of the content professional and gives them there. And they have content professionals, PhDs in biology, who have done these things. That then took that away from us. So now we know that our course, we serve over 600 students a year in our online sessions. We know now that our course is available to all of our students. They're totally ADA compatible, and they give that authentic, real science experience to our students that our transfer cousins wanted us to do 15 years ago.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Just want to tell you, eScience did not pay for this presentation. Roy brought that. That's the kit he uses. I think Kelly used from Kendall Hunt. Is that the kit you use? There are several vendors in this space, okay? We all know that. But just wanted to make that clear. All right, let's move on. We have Tanya Murray from Coastline, also teaching biology.
Hello, thank you. I'm glad that I follow Roy because I can add to many of his approaches and actually contrast. We do a little different approach in biology. We have a similar objective, however. We're getting our non-majors through this requirement, and it has been one pro in having the labs online is that we can reach more people in a variety of different situations where they might not have been able to otherwise overcome any difficulties to get to the classroom, and we can now share many really important aspects of science with a much broader part of our community and our population. So that is one of the positive things about having some of our labs online. I think all of the panelists, as we chatted a bit before we started, agree that this is most appropriate for the non-major level. At the major level, there are a lot of laboratory skills in the sciences that must be experienced. So we all have participated in this at the non-major level. I would also like to echo Crystal's comments on the amount of time investment. It is often viewed by both students, I think, and professors that it will be easier to pick up some online courses in addition to what you're already teaching and supplement whether you're trying to meet requirements as a student or whether you're trying to fill LHEs as a professor. But it does take quite a bit more time because you don't have that 4 to 5 hour window where you're in class. So you have to think about that and schedule those 4 to 5 hours in your week. And that gets surprising when you sit down and actually start doing your regular substantive interaction, which we are, importantly, as we should, required to do. So one of the ways that we approach that in Bio 101, in my class I have both the lecture and the lab combined, and that's nice because we can very easily add a interactive activity, which is our lab activity, onto whatever content we're teaching in the lecture section. Each of our modules in our 16 weeks, students are required to complete one module a week. In our 8-week courses, they have to accomplish at least 2 a week. So for each beginning of the module, we have a video that is sent to them in both an announcement and available in their module page. They watch a brief video. They have guided note-taking as they're watching that. Videos rarely last more than 5 minutes. We know the attention span even of ourselves, which is sadly shortening. So we try to keep those very short, but it's a nice way to really reach them with a visual that we would have normally given them in a face-to-face situation to help them really see the concepts that they're about to dive further into. Then we do a brief quiz on that. We grade those each week. And that was a challenge getting used to, yes, every morning for 2 hours, I need to be online addressing those answers and grading those quizzes so that the students know as they are completing that module where they might need to adjust their understanding. And then I also often post commonly missed or common misperceptions in the module's content in a forum that I call fuzzy topics. And so they should be reviewing those before each quiz and exam. There are also labs that will require grading, and then we have discussion forums. And our discussion forums, depending on the course, may be weekly if we don't have the video concept assessment, or they may be at least 5 scattered throughout the session. And those tend to be some of the most rewarding ways to interact and have regular substantive interaction with our students. And it's also a very rewarding way to teach concepts in a way that is very relevant to their lives. So for example, we have approximately 6 discussion forums in our Bio 100. We include topics such as genetics and personalized medicine, the human microbiome, evolutionary anachronisms, and the role of ecosystem engineers. So all of these things are relevant to either their personal health or the environment that they see around them. And we get fantastic participation. We have really great discussions. And I keep that discussion forum open for a very short period of time to force everyone to participate within a window of time. So it really is like having a face-to-face discussion. As we move into discussing some of the delivery methods, we have steered away from the lab kits only because, well, for 2 reasons. The main reason is we've tried to reduce costs to our students. The textbooks just have soared out of reasonable price ranges, so we've really tried to be able to provide affordable mechanisms for the students, cutting back on textbook costs, and it's also an impact to our environment that I think can be avoided. Lab kits, I do agree that eScience is one of the best ones that we have come across. We would like to use those. However, not only the cost is concerning, but also the fact that we teach an 8-week course of the same 6-week Bio 101 that we're trying to keep standardized across all of our sections. And so having that much shorter time, plus our military students, we're worried that the kits might lag in enough time getting to them, or the students might lag in ordering their materials, such that half of the semester could be gone before they're really having the materials that they need. So we've steered away for those for now. We have completely open education resources for all of the science courses that I teach currently. So we use virtual labs, and in those virtual labs, there are lab manuals that go along with each exercise. And in order to then also document the student work, we also use Proctorio. We have them show their student ID. We have them have closed notebooks. We do not allow another window to be opened. I always tell them, I'm just trying to avoid you Googling all the answers for your Bio 100 course. And I want you to read, think about it, write your notes, learn from your mistakes, and then apply that to your exams and your finals.
All right, thank you, Tanya. It's time now for questions, comments. So I know some of you probably teach science, you probably teach online, some of you don't. Any question or comment that's relevant about science labs online?
Hi, I'm Bobby Gray from Riverside City College, and I teach chemistry. And I'd like to know how you guys make sure that your students are the ones who are doing the labs at home. So say I wanted the students to do a titration. How do I know that it's that student who's doing the titration? Do they video themselves and send it in like a little short clip, or how does that work?
So my students have to document their lab work, and I allow them to document it one of two ways, either with photographs or with a video. So quite often, most of my students will choose video, and it's easy for them to record themselves on their laptop webcam. And so I actually see the student doing the lab. Those who do the photography, I ask that they do include some photographs where I can see them in the photographs also, but half of the photographs are going to be of each of the measurements that they record. So if it's a volume in a cylinder, I need to see the actual cylinder with the volume, the meniscus. If it's a mass on a scale, they photograph the mass on the scale where I can read the actual digital number. So I see my students in their lab journals when they submit them to me.
Okay, thank you.
And one here, and I think yes, she was next.
I just had a quick question for Tanya. You mentioned you keep the discussion board post to a short time frame. Do you mind sharing with us that time frame? How
Sure.
long?
So our regular module will begin on a Monday and end on a Sunday, and then within that module, they're required the discussion forum opens on that Monday, and then closes Friday at midnight. So they're also required to make they have to make 2 posts. One addresses whatever the topic is and whatever the requirement is. That must be posted by Wednesday, and then they have to respond to another classmate by Friday. And I am inflexible in opening and letting people jump back in, unless it's a technical issue, which does happen from time to time. Otherwise, it's inflexible. Sorry, you can't come back. And it would be, I explained to them, it would be like walking into an empty room and starting a discussion. Everyone's left already.
And I just wanted to echo that. Our course is done in 8 weeks. We have 8 discussions, same kind of thing. They have 3, they're required to do 3, but they have to do their original post by Wednesday, and then by Saturday, they have to do 2 more posts talking about their students. And the way we explain this is that in our laboratories classes, then you work in a lab group, and that's the expectation that you're going to be sharing those ideas. So that we do basically the same thing with our discussions that way. One other thing, I try and change my discussions in the biology every semester, so you don't get people going to other classes and having seen that or having friends that answered those questions before. And I try and make it so that each semester there is something that has happened in the news, and you can get all kinds of biology in the news, something that has been very recent, and have them always on the same topics, but have them respond to those topics. So it just, again, keeping it relevant.
I actually have 2 questions. I teach meteorology at De Anza College, and this last year I actually launched an online weather and climate lab. And that being said, I went to Finish Faster Online as you were talking about it, and looked it up, and my class is not listed there. So I'm kind of curious as to why that may have happened, or am I supposed to reach out to somebody to
You just did.
make that happen? Okay, perfect.
So,
Perfect.
Logan, if you could note that so we don't forget, we'll figure that out and make that right.
Okay, that's awesome. The other question I had was about lab manuals. So I just started teaching this class online for the first time, and I've realized that The lab manual that I use, while it was good for the face-to-face classes where I could have people buy it and share it, and there's this thing now where students are allergic to textbooks. They're allergic to buying textbooks, and if I require it, they drop. So but between that and the fact that the lab manual is written by people who love to listen to themselves talk, it's extremely wordy, very poorly written. I have decided, like, after having 15 students drop the first week in the ad drop period, okay, this lab manual is not working. That being said, I want to create my own written labs now. And is that going to be a problem with the lab manual requirement? Like, can I create my own labs, or can I make it an OER, or like what can I do to make that happen?
Yes. The curriculum committee, consult with your curriculum committee, your department chair. The guideline, by the way, not requirement, but it does appear to be respected by both sides of CSU and community colleges, requires a lab manual, right? But that can come in an electronic form, OER, publisher, written by you. I mean, ideally, it'd be vetted by some other of your colleagues. Tanya, you do the OER thing, right?
That's how we have managed all of our lab activities, is we have the written assignment and the written, all the information that accompanies it in an electronic document. And so that's what each document is then just plugged into that exact little slot in the module that says, this is lab number 6, it's due on this day, and here's your lab manual for it. And it's just a PDF. They fill it out, they can take pictures, they can scan it, and yes, it works very well.
Right. You might, I doubt you'd get challenged on this, but you might keep the document separate handy in case you're ever asked, is there a lab manual? Yes, here it is, in electronic form. But in this way, it's much more consumable for the student to have it electronic in each Canvas module just in time as they need it.
Yeah, and that's actually how I'm writing it, is basically like a full-on lab manual. So.
Yes.
I think OER is a great use, a way to save money for the students, which is one of the reasons we have it in my class also. But what we've done is all of the lecture content is OER. So we've gone through and adopted an open textbook, and I edited it to make it fit what I need in my class. And I've offset the cost of the lab kit in the class that way, since the lab kit does have some cost to it. So there's no textbook cost any longer to help with that.
And we have
And just one real quick comment there, because we did that for 13 years. One of the things we ran into is that our lab manual was not ADA 2 compliant. And you've got to remember that now you're going to be challenged on that. And if you've got a picture there, it has to be able to be there. It has to be able to be read by a screen reader. If you have videos showing there, they have to be ADA compliant. So, so that's a big concern that's outside of your content area that you need to address. And I just want to, because for years we were kind of loosey-goosey on that, and now it's coming to you got to have it.
and especially, Roy, in science, right? Where you have diagrams, visuals that are very difficult that cannot be explained in a very quick alt tag. So you're developing your own. As you think of that, visuals are fine, but make sure there's text around that can be read by a screen reader that describe what the text is trying to convey.
Hi.
Yeah.
Jenna Trench. I teach biology at Casumnes River College. I'm currently teaching just the lecture, only 3-unit sections online, but we want to go to labs. So Tanya, I wanted to know a little bit more about if you're using the open educational resources lab, maybe a lab of your own publishing, which is how we do it. We have our own lab manual. I'm wondering, when you said virtual labs, do you mean the students are just interacting with the lab material solely online, or are they doing hands-on stuff, or is it kind of a mix of both?
So I'm glad you asked that. We have, throughout the semester, for the modules that require a lab activity, sometimes we have them do a discussion, sometimes we have them do an actual lab. For the virtual labs, there are several different providers who have usually received a grant and have been required to develop open resources to share with the community. So PHET out of Colorado State University has a lot of really interesting labs for all the sciences. There's a lot of physics, there's a lot of chemistry, there's some biology. That's just one example. And what those are is you enter into a virtual laboratory. So it looks like you're stepping up to a lab bench. You are then, the manual is then attached to the side, and a lot of times it looks like a little book, and you click on the book and you actually flip the pages. For example, we have one for microscopy, and there's a microscope. They'll click on the objective changes and shows them the slide image, and then they refer to their lab manual to learn more about what they're looking at and then answer some questions regarding that. So that's the virtual space. When we've been able to incorporate hands-on by requiring them to do an at-home experiment. So by about, depending on whether it's an 8 or a 6 week, within very early on in the session, they have to post what their question is and their hypothesis is in a separate discussion forum for their experiment that they're going to do at home. And I love this activity because now you get to one-on-one say, here's where you're missing the scientific method, here's how you need to change it a little bit to make sure you have one question, you're testing one variable at a time, and you have a testable hypothesis. And they learn so much by that process alone. And then, as Crystal does, having them take pictures of their work. It's really fun to get to see these students at home with their prize that they've accomplished and they're very proud, and they do a fantastic job. And so that's our hands-on component. And again, I think probably one of the most valuable applications of the inquiry process.
Down here too.
And again, I'm going to add to this, I don't want to badmouth virtual, because we use a lot of virtual things too. But one of the things that we wanted to make sure our students understood is the idea of unintended consequences. And the thing about virtual is virtual always works. And we wanted them to understand that that's not science, that real science doesn't always work. And so we have 18 labs in 8 weeks that they have to do. And every one of those labs is based on the scientific method. You got to have a question, you got to have a hypothesis, and then you got to observe it. And you can't just observe it with your eyes, you can't just observe it with your ears. You got to touch it, you got to smell it, you got to taste it. And so that's what we built our labs around, this idea that we wanted authentic science experience in parity with what our students were doing on campus.
With the microphones back here, we have, I hope someone's keeping track of the,
From the very beginning. Yeah. Someone hand him.
since she has it, but you're next. This guy's next. Okay, please.
I'm sorry. Christina Hinkle from Saddleback College. I was just wondering if any of your transfer partners have expressed concern about the labs going online or appreciation, either way.
Tanya?
I have to say that I haven't heard anything at all. Our lab meets all the requirements for transfer to both the Cal States in our area and for the UCs. Matter of fact, my chemistry lab is a part of our online degree pathway for our business admin majors. There are 3 degrees that do that. And that degree is fully accepted at Cal State Fullerton into their online program too. So we have not heard anything about ours. It's accepted everywhere so far.
As long as the community college's curriculum committee develops a course outline of record and a DE addendum in the appropriate way to lead students to the SLOS, it is a local decision what requirements they might put on their instructors. And if they do their job correctly, it is by definition transferable.
And early on, that was a problem, but I think it's been solved now. The only thing I can say, again, we've been doing this for 15, 16 years now. I still get questions from out-of-state universities on it. And after you send them the syllabus and tell you what they do, I've never had any one of our courses not be accepted. But sometimes I have had questions from the departments coming back to me and asking, what did you do? What did you experience?
Especially from private colleges or out of state. Yes. All right, sir.
Hi, my name is Neil. I teach chemistry, and I'm curious about liability. So a student gets a kit, and they get injured. What happens?
You know, that was one of the reasons why we were a little slow to do this. And So that's why I don't have our own developed labs. I don't have the students go out and buy materials or glassware or chemicals or reagents. It's all supplied by eScience. The students in the liability, it's between them and eScience. So they have to go through a specific agreement with eScience. They sign a contract with them, a safety contract, that's submitted to me. I keep it on record. And any other liability issues or concerns, they address directly with eScience.
And then I have one more question. So if you're comparing, these classes are together, so you'd have an online option and then a live version of a similar class. How do you feel these students would compare against each other in terms of their skill sets?
Very comparable. As a matter of fact, I have the online version, and a colleague of mine teaches one that's face-to-face, all OER, the labs that we've developed. I've been very careful to make sure that the labs I've chosen are very similar and comparable to the ones they do face-to-face. And I believe the student success rate and what they've been able to achieve is pretty similar between the two classes.
Regarding liability, it might be worth your while to consult the risk services department at your district or your college. Show them waivers that the kit companies produce. I know.
I ran into the same question, and all of the providers, the proprietary providers, said the same thing, that if I sent them to go purchase things and they got injured, then we would be liable. And we have no control over what they're buying exactly and what they're using. But when it's the kits, again, the liability is with eScience, and they have the insurance, and it all goes through them. And then just a personal experience in the comparison between virtual and online, and I was telling them earlier, when I needed to take my organic chemistry requirement to go on and apply to graduate school, I was pregnant, and I lucked into a professor who was experimenting with online virtual manipulations, and so I took my whole organic chemistry with using virtual manipulations. Of course, I'm not a chemistry major, and I did not take all of my labs by any means virtually, just that one, but my skill set has allowed me to be where I am today.
And very quickly on the comparisons, I'm a biostatistician, and so I was really concerned about that. Are they in parity? Are the student learning objectives the same? And so I actually got a grant to look at that. I taught 2 online sessions and 2 on-campus sessions, gave the exact same tests. They did the labs were in parity with what they were doing, did the analysis of it. 15 lecture student objectives, 10 laboratory student objectives, and the comparisons came out, no statistically significant differences in any of it.
Hi, my name is Anna Heed, and I also teach physiology, anatomy, and basically advanced biology courses. One question that I have, how is the collaboration factor in your online classes? Because usually in the labs we have groups of lab mates that they always critique each other, and they kind of have this fun, something goes wrong or something like that. I understand we can substitute that with the good discussion platforms or signature assignments online. But I was always thinking that, is that a concern for you, that they just lack that collaboration? Or if not, how do you give that collaboration now that is necessary, I think, for our online classes?
Let's give Kelly a chance too.
So, yeah, it's fine. I know no geologists in the room, so.
Yeah. Hey, all right.
So I probably take a not very popular approach, but I'll say it anyways. There is collaboration. You see students that are working together, and in the open, I have a discussion area where they can post questions to each other and stuff. But I think about a regular class, and in regular classes, you have some people that prefer to work alone. I'm not going to force people to work with someone, because sometimes, and same thing in a lecture class. And so I think it's a little different when you have these online classes, and we kind of force everyone to talk to each other. And I teach a class with 120 students at Cal State Fullerton every Wednesday night, face to face. And I have a lot of students that choose not to interact with their students. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with some students interacting when they want to, and others not, because I think that models what happens into a face-to-face class. So in the online, we require they do some interaction, but I'm not as concerned about it because I think it models what we're doing in face-to-face to begin with.
I think one way that you can have that interaction occur is with my labs. I have each lab that we have, there's a discussion board posted, and it's not graded, it's no credit involved, but it's just share your results. And I like for them to take photographs of their experiment and post them and share them with their classmates. And you find that they all love to see what everyone else is doing, and they do comment on it.
All right, we've run out of time, but as promised, this is not the end of this conversation. It's just the beginning. So I hope you gave us your name and college email address. We'll log you into our Community of Practice portal for faculty interested in or are teaching lab sciences. Thank you very much, and thanks to our panel.